Welcome to the Stay Grounded podcast, brought to you by JavaPresse Coffee Company. My name is Raj Jana, and I'm the Chief Brewing Officer here at JavaPresse, where we help people make daily happiness a priority using the coffee we love. I interview people from all walks of life to discuss happiness, success, fulfillment, and ways to infuse it all into daily life. I want to dissect different thought processes and turn them into powerful insights that empower you to stay grounded and make daily happiness and fulfillment a reality. So thanks for joining me today. Now, let's get to grinding. Alrighty, everybody. Welcome. My name is Raj Jana. I'm the host of the Stay Grounded podcast, where we interview people from all walks of life to discuss happiness, fulfillment, and how to have more of it in everyday living. Today, I want to really introduce a super awesome guy. His name's Marc. Marc has got a phenomenal story, and he's probably one of the most interesting people I know personally. And I know that his story will likely resonate pretty amazingly with a lot of you. Marc has worked in Hollywood. He works in the tech space now and has a company called Wild Story, where he helps different types of entrepreneurs and brands tell their stories in an engaging way. And so before we really get started, Marc, how are you?
I'm awesome, Raj. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm stoked. This is going to be great.
Yeah, of course, man. I'm glad you could be here and glad you could make the time. And, so before we jump into sort of the interview and really getting to know you more, I'd love if you could just give a snapshot of your story as the master storyteller. Give a snapshot of your story so that our audience can get some context about who you are and where you come from, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll try to keep it short because I know we have a lot we want to talk about. But I'm a regular guy from, I grew up in Detroit, nothing fancy, pretty middle-class kids or middle-class family, middle-class kid. My father was an attorney and my mother was a school teacher for a while until she stopped to take care of the family. We just lived a real middle-class existence, especially when Detroit was doing well. So it was, driven by the auto industry and a lot of things shaped me during that time that I'll talk about. But one of them was I had a ton of friends that would either be moving in or moving out, because the nature of the auto industry was, you'd ship engineers in, you'd ship them out, and you just kind of get moved wherever. And that was always something that really affected me and really had a lasting imprint on the way I viewed life. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but I never wanted to be one of those families that just kind of moved in and out and was controlled by your career. So, I also had a lot of other experiences that really gave me a love for story, and we could talk about those a little later if you'd like. But one thing led to another. I went to University of Michigan, and I moved out to California to pursue a storytelling career. I always wanted to be a screenwriter, and I started working for Disney and driving film around. And what I would do actually is I had a all access pass to the Disney lot because I had these giant spools of film that I had to carry. And so I was like, it was like movie star 1, movie star 2, Marc Gutman. And I was in my old Oldsmobile car that was barely, able to run next to a couple Porsches. And I would go up and down the lot and I would pop my head into different producers' offices, just trying to make friends. And now I think about it, it's really funny. And I don't know if you could even get away with that. But that's how one producer took a liking to me, asked me what I wanted to do, and one day slides a little piece of paper across the table to me and says, call this number. And I call the number and I go for an interview, and it turns out to be an interview with Oliver Stone and his production company. And so
wow.
I interviewed, I was nervous. I sent a certified priority mail envelope every day for about 9 days to them, telling them how much thank you kind of card, telling them how much I, loved the interview, and I thought it was just a great fit. And eventually they were like, stop sending us all these envelopes, you have the job. So from there I was a story editor, and that's where I really cut my teeth on story. Worked on, a bunch of movies there, ended up writing some scripts for that production company, went on to work for some movies like Osmosis Jones and some others, and was doing some comedy punch up. And I think where, it gets really interesting is for the first part of that period in my life, I was so stoked. I was so in love with story and the movies, and it had always been my dream. And when I got there, one of the things I realized that my dream didn't really measure up to reality. And there was a lot of people there working really hard. It's a very competitive industry. A lot of times I was very curious, like we go out, we meet people, and then I'd find out only, after about 2 drinks in, they'd be like, oh, and here's my script. Right. And it was always about some sort of business. And I also started looking down the road towards the people that I really admired. And most of them weren't that happy, and that really was like this big learning to me. I was like, you have everything you want. I mean, these are guys that are writing, have huge screenwriting careers, literally making millions and millions of dollars before they're 30 years old, living my physical dream of having a big house in California and walking around the pool in their slippers and their bathrobe. And they were my friends, and we wrote together, and they were all very, very unhappy. I also started to become very, very unhappy as I was chasing, trying to make a career instead of writing stories that were relevant to me and that were my own personal story. I started trying to write things that I thought would sell. And so this isn't really the purpose of this podcast, but I'll just leave a little message out to the listeners that when you're really telling your story, it's got to be your story. It's got to be authentic. You can't live someone else's story, or else you're going to be miserable. And that might be ultimately when we talk about, ways of being happy. That's really a clear one for me now. But at the time I didn't know that. I just wanted to be successful. I was trying to do all these different things, and I effectively became burnt out. And so in an effort to find a little bit of happiness, I'd always been really enamored with the outdoors. When I was in college, I spent a summer in the East Coast hiking around, in Maine, in Vermont, Mount Katahdin, and Lake Winnipesaukee area for this program we had at Michigan called NELP, which stood for the New England Literature Program. And it sounds a little hippy dippy, but we'd hike around, we'd backpack, we'd read Thoreau and Emerson and all these, East Coast literature, but in the context of getting out and in the mountains. And so I had this love for the mountains, and I came out to Boulder, Colorado to take a break to find some clarity, and I never left. And really quickly, I'll wrap it up. And as I got here, I got very enamored by the technology scene, the entrepreneur scene. And if the storytellers in Hollywood were my tribe, the other tribe, the people that I never knew existed, was this whole entrepreneurial movement. I didn't even know it existed. And I was just so taken with everybody by their drive and really their stories, because essentially every entrepreneur is dreaming this massive dream. They're the little guy trying to just do something incredible and then making it a reality. And those stories were just bigger than Hollywood. I mean, they were like real life. I mean, in Hollywood, we're telling all these fiction stories for the most part, unless we're doing documentaries or real purpose stories. But these entrepreneurs were doing big things. So I didn't even make the connection at the time that I wanted to be a storyteller for them. I just wanted in. And so I started a tech company. I still have it. That went well. But I needed to get back into what I really believe is my purpose, which is storytelling. And so you want to talk about happiness. It was a big, and this is probably a good way to segue into this topic. It was a really, really hard thing to figure out, because I knew that storytelling made me super, super happy. But the only ways that I knew how to do it were in very traditional models. So very clear to me that you could do it in the movies. You could do it in advertising. You could do it in public relations. Right. I try all that stuff, and it never was really fulfilling. And so what I had to do is go on a real soul searching process of figuring out, what do I want to do, and what would make me happy, and what was the kind of work I wanted to do, and then how to make a business out of that. And it wasn't easy, and I had a lot of self-doubt. And along the way, I just had a lot of entrepreneur friends. I would say, look, I just want to tell stories for business. And they'd be like, great, why don't you do that? And I would respond, I don't think that's a business. You can do that? And they're like, it's 100% a business. And I said, tell me how it's a business. And they said, just make it a business. And to some degree, it was that easy. And it's been that easy. And we're still always figuring it out, because it's this weird nebulous thing that not a lot of people are doing. And so really paving the way to be true storytellers for businesses and brands. And so that's where it leads me today. And all I can say is I'm very happy. And we could talk about that a little bit further if you'd like.
Oh, for sure. Mark, you look extremely happy. And just the way you talk about what you're doing right now is really inspiring to myself. And it's amazing. I want to touch on one thing you said, which I thought was really incredible, that the stories you were seeing from a lot of these smaller business owners and entrepreneurs were sometimes bigger and more exciting than some of the stories you'd seen in Hollywood. And I think that's such a powerful concept for our listeners and just anybody. I mean, everybody's got a story to tell. And I think a lot of people are afraid of living their story from a fear of failure, doubt, angst, responsibility, whatever it may be. Do you have any insight on that? In just a sense of like, how do you live your story better? How do you use your own story to fuel your happiness? Because it looks like you're doing a remarkable job of that, and I think it's really crazy.
Yeah, and I want to be real clear. I mean, I joke around a lot about, I've got this Facebook life that looks miraculous, and then I've got real life that has bumps. And so I am happy today and most likely tomorrow. And I think I was happy yesterday, but I have bumps too. And so I think that understanding that your story isn't this curve that starts at the bottom and accelerates up and never has any dips. And actually, there's a couple things about the story format and when you're creating a story that as human beings, why we connect with true stories, and true stories have a moment of crisis. They have something happens, typically not good in almost every story, to start the story on the way, whether or not, the hero tries to disarm a bomb with his father and it blows up his father, right? Or then he's got to spend this whole next hour and a half trying to, wrestle with, these demons of not just, stopping terrorists, but how do I overcome these? I wasn't good enough as a son. You look at all these great movies and we could, if you want to pick one, but even comedies, one of my favorite examples is I always refer to Blades of Glory, literally one of my favorite movies. And in that movie, Chaz Michael, they get in a fight on the stand. Everything's going well. He's like the champion figure skater and he gets banned from figure skating, and they've got to come up with a new plan. And so just the very nature of stories suggests that there's going to be bumps and that your story is going to have sort of this curve of ups and downs. And so not saying that that's great, but finding a little bit of comfort in that up and down is definitely one way. And then you kind of touched on it, that it's really funny, everyone has an amazing story. You just got to find it and be comfortable. Most people don't think that their story is relevant or important. And we have a little bit of a saying that the more specific you get with your story, the more universal it becomes. And so as I tell you details about where I'm from and my own personal experience, everyone can start to find their own meaning and their own relation to those details. And a lot of people want to shy away from details because they feel like it's too specific or that it pigeonholes them or it's too narrow. But, the opposite couldn't be more true. And that's really in Hollywood. What big writers are trying to do is come up with these very, it might be a big idea. It might be this crazy, huge concept movie. But if you think about it, every movie's, it's about love. It's about connection. It's about the things that we can all relate to. That really bring even all movies together. It's just how that story is told.
That's a really great insight. And I love that. It's almost like the roller coaster of life is a beautiful thing. The misfortune in your life is almost like a telling point of who you are and a defining point for who you are, which I think is great. And I think, like I said, I love the way you think about storytelling and how it applies to daily life. That's something that I think most people could definitely use and apply in their own living, no matter where you are in life. So tell me more, Mark. So you're living in Boulder now. You're living in Boulder. You've got your wife and your 3 kids.
Correct. Yeah. Full house for sure.
Full house for sure, man. Okay. So tell me, how does your day start? What does a typical morning look like for Mark when he gets up with a full family and a full business? How do you manage to get started and get moving?
Yeah, so it's really been a process, and it's always a little bit different. One thing I'll say is I had a life-changing event myself that about a little over a year ago, I went to a entrepreneur farm to table dinner. I actually helped put it together and host it here in Colorado. And I got West Nile virus. And I spent about 2 months in bed. I couldn't think. I couldn't work. I couldn't do the things I wanted to do. And it really put my life in perspective. And it was one of those life-changing moments about how do I want to spend my days? What do I want to do with my life? And I really felt that it was a sign in my body telling me that I had to take care of myself. And so why that's relevant as I got healthier, that really has always been my focus. But I kind of got away from it. And it comes back to that story I told you before about wanting to put my life in where I wanted to live first before my job. And so it's always been about this. I believe that if I surround myself with the right people in the right environment, with the things that I love to do when the sun is shining, the rest will take care of itself. So I start my day every morning. I get up, I still like from that illness, I just don't get up as early as I used to. Today, I got up at 6:15. About every other day, I'll meditate. So I went through a Vedic meditation course, which is very much like transcendental meditation, but it's the generic name, I guess. Transcendental is the commercial. Yep. And I spend time doing that. Then I'll come down and really, I come downstairs. And one of the things that I've learned is that food and alcohol and what I put into my body at all levels really affects my mood for the day and how I work. So I've moved to, I start with a power shake of different varieties. One that I picked up recently in an event with, it's got some eggs in it and some protein powders and things like that. I have another one that comes right out of powder, but that gets me going. And that seems to like carry me through lunch and makes me feel full, but energized. And then I will typically make coffee. And so my wife and I went through, exactly. My wife and I went through a home remodel not too long ago. And we put a lot of things in the home, but one of the things that I get the most pleasure from is instant hot water, because I'm then able to make French press coffee. So I love French press, but it was always, I think my favorite coffee is actually a pour over, but I have no patience to sit there and watch it drip. So French press is the next. And we usually, right now we switch it up. We're into French roast organic blend that we like, and organic, of course. And we start that and we have a cup of coffee. And then I come to the office. One of the intentions I've just set is, and this is recent, and we'll see if it holds up. You can check on me a little bit later. On Friday, I impulsively bought a bike. Now I've already got like 3 or 4, but I bought like one that was very, very specific, that had sort of a 10-speed geometry, the fenders, and saddlebags and all that. Because my intention is I want to start and end my day by riding to work about 4 miles when appropriate. Today, not good. I've got to be in the car. I've got to do some other things. But when we do our goal setting, that's one of my goals. And then I get to work and I try to read for about 20 minutes, and then I start my day. So that's my morning routine. It leads into, my work day. I try to leave my mornings open typically from 9 to 11, because that's my most productive time. That's when I can really jam on whatever that most important thing is for the day. And then things like podcasts, meetings, lunch, that can all happen after. And I'm always really trying to do one active thing a day. So I play hockey twice a week during lunch. I might go to yoga, but always like putting a real priority on physical activity. And I notice my happiness level is always at its highest. It's always a 10 when I make time for those types of activities. And as busy people, whether or not you're an entrepreneur, whether or not you work at a corporation, we always feel too busy to exercise. And that's the first thing that we always neglect or say we can't do, or, say we're going to go at lunch and then a meeting comes up and we take this meeting. I put it on my calendar and it's sacred. And one of the things I love about playing hockey twice a week is it's a team sport. And so it's on my calendar. 100%. And so, piece of advice I'd give, you don't have to play hockey, but if you go to yoga, if you want to go for a walk today, before this podcast at 11 a.m. Mountain, I told my wife we'd go for a long hour-and-a-half walk for our daily exercise. And so I was accountable. She was coming to meet me at the office, and we did it. And, I could have blown that off had it not been for her standing here waiting for me, because there's always something else. There's always something on your list. There's never enough time in the day to get through all the things we need to do. And so I put a priority on that. And I always do it during lunch, because you mentioned at the beginning, I've got a wife and 3 kids. And if I try to do it in the morning or in the afternoon, there's always an excuse as to why it's not going to happen.
That's brilliant. So really one thing I'm taking away from that is, one, yourself pretty well enough to schedule things in so that they don't get compromised. But I think that's a point in itself. I mean, it sounds like you're prioritizing the things that make you happy and then letting everything else sort of fall into place. So that the workouts make you happy, so you prioritize those. You never skip those. That your morning routine makes you happy. So I definitely want to ask some more questions about that. But as a general concept, is that something you resonate with? And do you have any more thoughts you can share on just making happiness, like just where happiness falls on the spectrum of priority?
Yeah, I think that's such an awesome point, Raj. I mean, it's all about that. And I find that a lot of people tell me, well, I don't have time to do this, right? But I would argue that you do. It's just always a trade-off. And I'll give you an example. For probably about the last 10 years now, one of the big things in my life is I grew up in Michigan, and I love being around the water, and I live in Colorado, but my family, we spend our summers back in Michigan for 6 weeks. Now, I'm not independently wealthy. I'm not one of those entrepreneurs that doesn't work and just has a big bankroll and I'm hanging out. I'm literally relocate my family there. I work from there. This year was a particularly heavy workload, but sometimes I joke I don't either work or play particularly well up there. And I'm sure my businesses have not grown as fast as they could have, because I've architected them so I can be virtual, so I can, always be on the go. And I'm not always in my business. It's not like my focus, like 100% of my time, because that wouldn't make me happy. I would burn out. And so having that experience and doing that is a decision I've made. And I'm sure there's cost to it, not just the hard cost, but the cost in, other things. I have to make that decision, but that's what makes me happy. My wife and I, we spend a lot of our disposable income on experiences. We also, when our children were young, we had a date night, at least once a week, or every other week, where we would, go to a movie, and that movie might cost us with dinner and babysitter and movie like $125 or $150. At times when that was like a really lot of money to us, it's still a lot of money. And you can't look at it that way. We always look at it and say, we can't value the movie at $150. It's this experience that we're having together, because that's what makes us happy. And so for me, to answer your question, my priority on happiness is it's the most important thing. And sometimes, like anyone, I lose sight of that, and I start chasing things. I start thinking that growing my business faster, or making more money, or advancing in my career will make me happier, or remodeling my house will make me happier. I mean, like I look at none of that stuff makes me happier, right? Like what makes me happier is time, or the things that, like exercise, like getting in the mountains, like over this Labor Day weekend, my wife and I, we went, and it's a thing to do in Colorado. We climbed 2 14ers. So, we have more 14,000 foot peaks than anywhere in the US. And we did that, and spending that time with her and making that space, those things make me really happy. Drawing in my journal, being artistic, being challenged, those things make me really happy. And so I try to continually set myself up for it, but I also don't want to give this impression like I've got it all figured out. It's a challenge, and it's something I have to be conscious of. I've got all my own routines, and on my desk right now, someone gave me the book, The Miracle Morning, right? And so I'm going through that, because I understand that morning routine is so important. It's one of those books I've never read, even though I'm an avid reader. And so I also think, like a good relationship, like the people in your life, being happy takes work. And so to think that it just shows up without intention, without cost, without compromise to other things in your life, I think would be misguided.
I think what you just said hits me so hard. I mean, this concept that happiness comes easy is so jaded. Comfort comes easy. Happiness takes work. Because happiness requires you to get outside of your comfort zone. And generally speaking, the things on the outside of your comfort zone are the things that bring you some sort of bliss and joy. And that always means getting up, going for a run, hanging out, making time when there's other things that are super important in life or super important, quote unquote. So I think that's brilliant, man. So you've got a lot of things that essentially are a part of your daily routine. What happens when let's say work does get tough and there are things picking up, or let's say there's a stretch where you're traveling a lot? You might not be able to do the big things like take an hour and a half walk with your wife or do all those big things, but are there little things that are a part of your daily routine that don't get compromised no matter where you are or what's going on?
No. So I think it's easy to disrupt my routine. I think that the trick is returning back to it and not beating yourself up because you've missed it or because I haven't meditated for 4 days. That doesn't mean on day 5, I can't pick it back up and it's any less valuable, because this whole idea for me of a morning routine is that it's a practice. It doesn't have to happen every morning. Now we try, and I love the idea of setting goals and intention and trying to make it happen. I think the one thing that is 100% always in my life is a cup of coffee. Always, coincidentally. I mean, and always a good cup. I've gone in and out of different types of variations of what I enjoy. But to me, that's always a way I start my day. I almost have this like Pavlov's response, right? Like when I smell the aroma, and it's just how I set my day. And it's also a bit about, I read a lot of content, every morning. I either read a book or I'm reading the news. And to me, to like have that cup of coffee, it's just this companion that is always part of my day. But then there'll be other things, I will try, if I'm traveling, to get out and walk. I will try to do different things. Sometimes, if you're traveling and you're stacked, it's just about like, hey, I gotta get up early because I gotta answer a bunch of emails or help out clients. But, the other thing, it's not really routine. I just try, like when I'm traveling, when I'm at an event, I really try to be as present as possible in that moment and live for where I'm at and let everything else fall to the side, because that makes me happy. And I get a lot of value from that when I get to really concentrate where I'm at, talking with other people, focusing on the client or what have you.
Is there and that's a hard thing for people to do. That's a hard thing for myself from time to time. Are there any tips you have for people to help them stay more present and help them appreciate what's happening right now versus thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow or what happened yesterday? Because I do think that's another skill that can be taught or learned. Do you have any insight on that?
A little bit. For me, it's two things. It's setting that intention. And so just bringing it back up, it's almost like a meditative mantra, right? Like be more present. So like, again, like I'll be at the dinner table, I'll check my phone and my kids will look at me and call me on it. And then I'll put the phone away. So I think that one of the things is sharing your intention to be more present. And then when your friends tell you, hey, Raj, you're not being present, sweet. Like that's a reality check.
Yep.
It's an intention to do that. I also think it's just mindset. And so, really going through the idea of, what is happening and how is life affecting you, that has a huge impact on your happiness. Not so much your intention to be present, but it's really thinking about like, is this happening to me or is it just happening? So that's one way that I deal with a lot of stress, is kind of this Buddhist way of looking at the world, which is like, it's not happening to me. It's just happening. I just happen to be a part of whatever is going on. And now how am I going to react? And it helps me to remove a lot of emotion from a lot of things, which, as we know, like emotion's awesome. A lot of times, sometimes we start to build these stories in our heads about what's happening. And then it just becomes this, death spiral of either limiting beliefs or, we get so wrapped around the axle, we can't move on to the next thing. We just we start to go to war with people or get frustrated or, start seeing negativity in things. that otherwise it wouldn't be there. So for me, it's mindset and intention on both those things, and like giving yourself permission to stumble. So it's hard for me to do that. I'm no expert in this, but like to say, look, like I wasn't present at that. Like I'm going to learn from that. I'm going to call myself on that. And I'm going to be present at the next event, because, it's just this ongoing journey. And I just notice that I feel better. It's kind of like this thing, like I stopped drinking as much as I used to drink, because I used to like I started feeling better. And my wife was like, wow, that's pretty funny, right? Like, I'm like, yeah. Go figure, and I still have a good cocktail now and then, but I just, it's like, I really am in tune with how things make me feel. So if making you present makes you feel better, makes the people around you feel better, it becomes a lot easier. And then I'll just say that, when I was lying in that bed and really concerned about my health, I just kept like asking myself, and I ask myself this all the time when I'm at a crossroads, like, if it all ended today, would I be happy? Like what matters in my life? And for me, it's never been my bank account. It's never been the car I drove. It's like, when you think about your eulogy, and it's not like a morbid thought. It's like, what do I want people to say about me? That, that I made them laugh, that I was an adventurer, that I took them on crazy experiences, that I always spent time, that I was around, right? Like those are the types of things that I want people to say about me. And it can be different for anybody else. But, it's a good question to ask yourself when you're trying to understand like what makes you happy.
How do you foster that discipline to just continue asking yourself this question? Do you journal? I know you mentioned a little bit about goal setting and setting your intention. How often do you review your goals? Is happiness and the things that bring happiness to you a part of those goals? Like how do you make this a process? Because I know there's myself and a lot of our listeners are in this space where we feel almost trapped from time to time. And there's a million different directions we can go. How do you sort of sharpen that focus to see the light at the end of the tunnel?
Great question. Sometimes it feels like it's a curse, right? Like I'm always chasing it. I'm always trying to work on myself. And it's not because I feel like things are bad or things aren't going well. It's just kind of the way I'm wired. And sometimes, honestly, I say to people, like, I wish I wasn't like this, because it's always on my mind. But, so I spend a ton of time doing things like trying to understand what's my underlying core focus or why. It took me a lot of years. For me, it's live creatively. So every time I'm at a crossroads or I get out of bed and I'm like, what's going to happen today? Why is today any better? I've got a bunch of client meetings and I've got to do different things. I think, well, your mantra is to live creatively. That means both like expressively, like in an artistic way, and like architecting my life in a creative way and approaching the world in a creative way to me. Once I heard a speaker that really reframed how I see the world. And what made me think of it is just the words I was using, which were like, I have to go do this. I have to go pick up my kids. And really, I catch myself saying that because I have this new mindset where I get to. And so I get to go pick up my kids. I get to run my business.
Yep.
I get to have that meeting. I get to make the decision about whether or not what we have to do with cash. Do we have to, let go of employees, or do we have to expand or whatever? There's a lot of stresses, as you know, running a business, and really reframing this get to versus have to. And then I think, I do a lot of journaling. I do a lot of visioning. I set my intention. I'm not good at goals. I'm a very visual person. I'm a very dreamy person. I'm great at like setting that vision. I'm really bad at goals, but I keep working at it. So it's something that I know that I'm not good at, but I return to it all the time. I set my goals. I'm coming back into them. I've done different business systems like Rockefeller Habits, Scaling Up, EOS. I'm always looking at something different. Right now, I really like the 12-week year as a methodology. It's a book that's very, very simple for saying, look, for the next 90 days, we're going to sprint towards this goal. And, as I mentioned, my goal of riding to work, I have to actually sit and do it, but that's going to be one of my goals. I want to get healthier. What are the things I have to do? I have to make sure that 5 days a week, I make time to work out, 2 of which I'm riding to work. So, and then you go back and you score yourself. But the idea behind that is not to beat yourself up. It's not to say, oh, I only got 40% this week. It's just to have some intention, because I can tell you and the people listening that the times in my life I've been the darkest, where I felt the most stuck, where I felt the most lost, or times when I say things like, I feel rudderless. I don't know what I'm doing. What is life all about? Like, what am I doing today? I don't even want to get up. And really, for me, what that would mean is, like, I don't have a goal. I don't know what I'm trying to do today. I don't know what makes me happy. One thing your listeners can do is literally write down a list of what makes them happy, and then frame it and post it. I have it here somewhere, and I'm looking at my journal, and maybe I can read, some of the things that I wrote, and I didn't even realize when we were going to do this podcast, I had that stuff. So, but I recently wrote what makes Marc happy, and then went through it and really thought about it and meditated on it.
I've always felt like writing stuff down does something psychologically for me. But one thing I wanted to just dive a little in on, this frame of the point, have to get. Like, I have to do this too. I get to do this. And that almost, for me, it feels like it's coming from a place of gratitude and gratefulness for where you are and the things that are happening to you, instead of you having to happen for it. I don't know if that makes sense, but I want to kind of dive in. How does gratitude play into your life? Like, is there, does it help you shape your decisions? Is it something you practice daily? What's up with gratitude?
Yeah. And for me, when I think of it's more this empowering mindset that, getting back into the story stuff, that you are the author of your own story. Like, this world we live in, you can almost virtually create any reality you want. Now, I will never sit here and tell you that's easy or that it's not without work. But literally, like, we live in this global world where, like, I could today decide that I want to sell a bunch of stuff on Amazon, and tomorrow be doing it and create a business, or whatever. And, there's so many different things, and I can connect with so many people. We can find our tribe of people, like, on Facebook groups. And so, I guess my gratitude is, I just can't believe, like, how crazy and amazing the world is, and the empowerment we have. And so, and that if we don't like something, we do have the power to change it. We just get in this mindset that sometimes it's very difficult. I wish I practiced gratitude a lot more. I do think of meditation as this gift I give myself. And so when I don't have time, when I'm feeling like I can't get to it, I always have to remind myself that both my meditation and exercise is this gift I give myself. I wish, like, I know people that write every day in their journal, like, I'm grateful for something. And I've done a little bit of that here and there, but it hasn't been a habit that's stuck.
I love that. That's a gift you give yourself. I think that screams gratitude right there. Even if it's not something you explicitly state, it's something that you do because you're grateful that you get to do it. And then you feel good that you're doing it for yourself. So it's almost like you're tricking this whole gratitude chain on yourself. And to help you feel it. I think that's brilliant. You know what, Marc, what I love so much about you and your story is that you've found these ways to make things work for you. Like, you know what works for you. You know that you're not much of a goals guy. You're a visions guy. You know that, there are certain things that you have to do to make yourself happy. Otherwise, the other things you need to do in life just doesn't happen. And I think that's so powerful. And I'm super inspired by you, to be honest. Like, you're making me want to go back and kind of relook at everything I'm doing, just because I think that's such an important point. I think a lot of people, and this goes back to the original point that you made about having your own story. Everybody's story is going to be a little bit different. And even though, my story is different, your story is different, but what's amazing is we can create our own stories. And you've given so much inspiration for people here to just take bits and pieces and turn that into something actionable. So I want to give you a hug right now. Okay. All right. There it is. Air hug or e-hug, however that works. So really, I wanted to start wrapping up the episode, because I know you're a busy guy and I love that you're here, and thank you so much for being here. I wanted to ask one final question. So in the midst of all your successes and your achievements, and the things that are happening, how do you stay grounded every day? What's your focal point? Like when everything else is failing in life, what do you come back to?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think two things really that are really powerful. One is my wife, Lindsay. She's just always been this rock. And when I go back, and I feel so fortunate because I have so many entrepreneur friends who have a lot of issues with partners and spouses and things like that. She's just like, we're very yin and yang. So where I'm this big dreamer, she shares in those dreams, but she's very stable, and she's my biggest fan. And so even when things aren't maybe looking great, or, we're taking a big risk, she's just always behind me. And that always gives me the confidence to push through and persevere. And I think also just taking a break. So like when things are bad and things aren't going well, if it's on a daily level, I'll just get out of the office and I'll say like, look, you know what? I'm not going to sit here and try to bang my head against the wall and try to make something work that is clearly not working today. I get out, but also on a macro level. I mean, if things are crumbling around, I get out, kind of the outdoors is my temple. And so I get out and it helps me to meditate on things and think about things, because for me, really, it's like I get all my ideas, all my breakthroughs, like when I'm walking, when I'm on my bike, when I'm in yoga, when I'm in the shower. It's never in front of the screen. It's always when I get into this sort of meditative state that lets your brain relax a little bit. And so for me, it's just trying to let that stress go through those physical outlets.
Awesome, man. That's and living in some place like Boulder definitely helps.
Yeah, when you get passed by like a 75-year-old grandmother, wherever you are, whether you're on a bike or a trail or whatever, there's always someone better than you, always someone more fit. So it's a little humbling at times.
Yeah, of course. But no, Marc, like I said, man, you've shared so much, and I appreciate every bit of everything you've said. So if there's anybody in the audience who ever wanted to reach out to you or learn more about what you do you have what's your website? What's your, if you have a contact where someone can get in touch to say hi or thank you, or just get in touch in general?
So my website's at www.wildstory.com. Pretty easy. And you can, I'll put it out there on the webcast. You can always shoot me an email at marc@wildstory.com, and happy to correspond. I mean, like, this is the stuff I love. And, a lot of times people will ask you, as you're trying to figure out what is that thing you're meant to do, is what would you do, if you didn't have to get a paycheck, what would you do for free? If money didn't matter. And it really is stuff like this. So I love working with businesses and helping them with their vision and values, and helping them find the essence of what they do and what makes their company great. And to me, a lot of this is about happiness and gratitude and finding out what's that electric emotional connection in the world. So, feel free to shoot me an email, marc@wildstory.com. I've probably done every self-development, every how do I find happiness exercise known to man. So if there's one I haven't, send it to me. And if you have questions on which ones are good ones, also let me know. I'm happy to share.
Oh my gosh. No, that's great. Marc, thank you so much. Guys, hope you guys loved this interview with Marc. He is awesome. And I'm definitely very grateful sitting on the other side of this, getting to listen to you. So Marc, thank you so much. For everyone else listening, my name is Raj. Thank you for joining us on the Stay Grounded podcast. Now go drink some coffee and be happy. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks for joining us today on this episode of the Stay Grounded podcast, brought to you by JavaPresse Coffee Company. My name is Raj. And I hope you found this interview helpful as you create your own ways to make daily happiness a priority. If you're interested in learning more about how your morning coffee can turn into a consistent source of joy in your life, visit www.javapresse.com to learn how our products can help you do that, and use the coupon code PODCAST for 10% off your purchase. Again, thanks so much for joining us. Stay grounded.